I want a fucking divorce. At least then I can go on Centrelink. As those words left my mouth, my world went silent. Still turning, but completely silent. I'd never experienced ringing in my ears before, but there you are. It happened. Whether it was spirit or tinnitus, it didn't matter. I was at peace for the first time in as long as I can remember. Okay, so I should wind it back a bit. A few years ago, I met a guy. Usual story. We met, we drank, things happened. We caught up a few days later and did it all again. Repeat until you actually say the words, I love you. And that's where it changed. Where was this fun-loving, protective guy that I met? The guy that couldn't stop telling me how lucky he was to have me, how sexy I was, and couldn't do enough for me, always take me out and spoil me? What? So he says I love you, I eventually say it back, and that's it? The honeymoon period is well and truly over? Seems like bullshit to me. What happened to my aptitude of living life to the full and carpe diem? Seemingly that also died when I said those words. Don't get me wrong, I'm not laying any blame to anyone here. If anyone, it's to myself for being completely drawn into a relationship that, now I know, was a falsification of expectations. Ah, I hear you saying, that's where I went wrong. Actually having expectations that a person who I met 6 months prior was still the same. Well, yes. Trust me. Never again. And blame. Blame is such an interesting word. We're also quick to lay it onto people who have wronged us and hurt us. But when do we look in the mirror and say, so what is it about me that allows people to treat me like an insignificant person? Now that is when the real work starts. You see, that is the thing about going through a divorce. Hurt people hurt people. If you're like me, you literally tried everything to make the relationship work. So when you were done, you were done. When you're faced with two people in their ego space, both fighting against each other based on hurt and fear of losing everything in their lives, is there any wonder that the IVOs and the lawyer talk starts to rear its head? Now, when I sat down to write this story, I started with all the details of what happened, how he hurt me, how I responded, how everything was just going from worse to worse. Then I realized, after a break, I wanted this piece to be about recognizing the signs that something is wrong and needs to change, and when you take that process in your hands, how the survival and thrival can look. To summarize, I know I don't need to say this, but divorce is never pretty. You end up hurting and discovering things that you wish you had known before the marriage in both yourself and your partner. But no matter what the story was, it never will change. So why keep it on repeat? Wow. As I speak those words out into existence, I can see how far I've come. You see, that's the thing with trauma in our lives. We can get stuck on a loop, and when we retell it over and over again, another version gets lodged into our memory, and therefore, even more healing needs to be done. It's like your favorite mixtape got stuck in the player. You know the way to get it out, wind the tape carefully with your pencil in the holes of the cassette, watching every inch and praying that those creases don't damage the part with your favorite song on. Am I showing my age now? For those of you who are listening to this who don't know what a cassette is, Google it. I definitely am not saying don't talk, cry about it. Sometimes you do have to make sense of it. So please do it. Do not deny yourself the relief of expressing how you are feeling about things. If someone is offering to hold space, including the angels, the trick is, and the one thing you'll find repeated from many sages' texts, is the power of letting go. So how do you compact a number of years of trauma-led decisions where you're living on empty, questioning what the heck you did wrong in your life, to have this happen, living in fight or flight state, to converting it into realizing that you did something incredible in your life? You just work out how and why. You lock yourself away, you lick your wounds, you cry, and I mean scream and really ugly cry. You read book after book and listen to every podcast you can about living with a narcissist. But ultimately, what happens is you'll either resonate with things or you won't. And then suddenly you'll realize, as cliche as it sounds, that everything has been leading you to that self-realization of a life purpose and that you are truly a survivor. Go on, I know you want to sing it. You're a warrior king or queen, and if you can survive this, skydive, diving, tattoo, hiring campers, traveling on your own, standing nude in front of a government building, meditation retreats, here you come. After all, life's for living, right? Obviously, this is not a requirement. This is what I've chosen to do. I knew something deep inside me was stuck, and that something was me. I look back on the whole thing now. And when I say whole thing, I mean the relationship and the aftermath, and relate it to how grateful I am that I had to experience this. The trick for me, after having a wee nudge, as the Scots say, aka my ancestors, and funnily enough his too, was to find out why I kept myself in this abusive loop. After some questioning, everything, I was led to remember I was brought up to believe that marriage isn't easy, life isn't easy. You don't just quit when things get hard. Marry a good provider, and you'll have nothing to complain about. So how did this relate to how I felt when I finally pulled the pin? Guilty. Oh my gosh, the guilt. What will my parents say after all they've done to help us out financially? What will my family say? What will our friends say? So here I am deciding to put myself first for the first time in the whole relationship, yet all I can do is think about what other people will say. I know you've been there, entering in the shadow of internal and external voices of judgment. So how do you shut them the fuck up? Well, when I find out how to do that and combine it with that quick healing solution, I'll let you know. The fact is, even though we live in a society of quick fixes, there is nothing more beautiful than the feeling you get when you have done the hard yards. And spoiler alert, there are many to get through. In my case, many dark nights of the soul, throwing my phone, screaming at myself in the mirror. That was such a great way to release. Oh, and boxing. No prize to work out who I was envisioning on the pads. When you finally recognize your part to play in the trauma cycles in your life and know that you have the power to choose again and change the story, you realize you are the director, the writer, and actor in your own play, or in my case, the writer in your own books. Sorry to highlight this, and I know it may trigger some, but with every situation in your life, there is a common denominator, and it is you. Yes, you. You, when you are old enough, you are the only one who can choose that you want a different life. You are the only one who can leave that toxic relationship or job. You are the only one who can surrender your ego and ask for help. And most importantly, you are the only one that can decide if you are deserving of the best that life can offer. If something isn't feeling right, then the chances are there's a disconnect to where you're supposed to be. I learned that the universe will send you signs. Enter in the concept of feather, brick, and truck. If you are lucky, you will get it after the feather. And by this, I don't mean the one that you find on the ground when your angels are near, although they're pretty cool. I mean the ones that are a warning sign of, hello, something isn't right here. Fun fact, in my case, that was very, very early on. And yes, I ignored it. What happens if you ignore the feather? The brick. Something that will happen with a bigger impact in your life to let you know something still isn't right. And then, well, if you're lucky, you may get another brick thrown at you if the guys think you'll finally listen. Mine, I think they threw half a wall over me in those last few years. But did I listen? You guessed it. Rolled into being hit by the metaphorical, or sometimes, as I've heard in other situations, a real truck. That thing that happens that is undeniably, unmistakably a sign that something isn't right. And unless something changes in this timeline, you are heading for so much unhappiness and hurt, not just for you, but the others it involves. Now, as always with opinions and free will, it is up to you whether you believe in any of this. And while I would say the majority of the people who want to listen to an audio on survival of toxic situations and divorce would be those who are interested in outcomes of taking a leap, or perhaps someone who has been through a situation that has changed their life or is in the process. So I'm guessing you have probably already heard of this analogy. So what was my truck turning point? Being told that we could have left it too long to have kids. Honestly, the complete numbness I felt for him, and realizing that is it possibly a blessing that we weren't going to be bringing kids up into this environment? Man, I can't tell you how conflicted I was. The first baby that I miscarried changed my life in so many ways. So maybe that was the first truck moment. The second miscarriage, this just confirmed that my intuition was telling me we were not supposed to have children. So, that first one, here I was just finding out that I was going to be a mum, and for as long as I remember, this is all I ever wanted. While I waited for the stick to change and show me my fate, the longest couple of minutes of my life, I completely broke down in tears. Of course, I told everyone it was because I was so happy, but it wasn't. I was thinking, fuck, I don't even know if I love him anymore, and now this? Fuck. Then the excitement of my mum, she was visiting with her annual visit, and one of the girls who worked for me, Quick aside here, just to lighten things up. She went to get my pregnancy test, and here's the kicker. She was due in 2 months. So you can imagine she was well and truly cooked. And here she is asking to have a test to see if she's pregnant. Absolutely hilarious. I can just imagine the woman behind the counter's face. But I'm so grateful for her that she went and got it for me because I lived in a country town. And need I say more? Now, this moment of trying to force a smile on my face through the fear of what the fuck do I do now? How do I even tell him this? He's made it very clear he didn't want kids until he was 40. But surprise, surprise, every time we have an argument, I would say those famous words. It's not working. We want different things. At some point, we have to realize we're pulling out the worst in each other. The goalpost on the family idea would be moved. Think carrot stick and donkey, and you would be getting the picture. Honestly, for someone who has always wanted kids, that was one hell of a truck that rolled over my dreams. Not just a small removal truck, a huge Alaskan logging truck. So what about my awakening? As you remember, back in December 2019 and January 2020, when the huge bushfires went through Australia, there were many needs for volunteers. And after finding out the second soul decided was not going to stick, I don't know why I wrote he, but she didn't feel right, so I think the second one was also a boy. Now I love animals and helping in disaster recovery situations. So for me, despite just having Stuart, our second puppy, descend on us, I was ready to go and fight the fires. I was with like-minded people who cared more about their animals and each other than ego. A natural disaster can really help put things into perspective. I could have stayed there for months helping out. How was being with a bunch of strangers sleeping in a tent feel more like home than my own beautiful home that I'd just built? Because I was allowed to be myself. Home is where the heart is, and my heart was there being in my element of helping a community and the animals who were victims and lost their homes. After dinner one night, we were all talking, and one of the vets mentioned that she'd only gotten married because she didn't want to have kids out of wedlock. Wow. Cue a quick memory recall of a conversation overheard in my early 20s. Well, I thought at least one of my kids would do it the right way round. Danny then went on to say that she had shoehorned herself into a life of unhappiness and no love because she wanted kids so badly. Boom. There it was. Took someone else to say it and literally take the words from my heart. Of course, did I listen that time? No, I didn't. Insert the emoji of a hand slapping a face. Interesting fact, maybe, the two of the vets I met after that mission ended up going back to their lives and becoming separated within weeks of being home. Just goes to show that when you're able to be yourself and away from your normal life, you can realize a lot. Over the last few years, I've spoken to a lot of people. Oh, you're traveling on your own. Oh, you're so brave. I could never be on my own like that. I think that is why a lot of people do not want to do these things on their own, especially be away, because maybe they're scared of having these epiphanies and finally having to listen to the lies that they've been telling themselves. When you realize little by little that you're feeling the loss of your will, values, and power in these kind of relationships, it hits you like a, yes, you've guessed it, a truck. It doesn't happen straight away, always gradually. You find yourself just giving in for an easy life, a quiet life. You find yourself making up excuses, the old headache and period pains. After all, you definitely don't want to be intimate with them, and you just can't bring yourself to say, I don't love you anymore. You find yourself in tears at the very thought of sitting in public with them, knowing that there's nothing between you anymore, and asking yourself, was there ever? So what do? You turn to a newspaper, a magazine, or more commonly, the mobile phones. So, back to the signs and the duvet made with red flags, thank you, Justine, for that one, that are always there. So why don't we listen to them? Well, that's the irony. You falling out of love with them helps you realize you're falling back in love with yourself. You just don't know it yet. You start to catch up with friends, wanting to talk about them, and when they ask how you are, you might say, honestly, things are a bit rough, but tell me more about your amazing muse. Buy some new lippy, go to the cinema, take yourself out for a date, for lunch. It feels amazing. You'll find things that light you up, and they'll become a non-negotiable, and you'll realize that you are slowly taking your power back. For me, one of those things was dyeing my hair blue, something I'd always wanted to do since I was younger. Of course, there were comments, it was going to look strange, but I knew I was doing it for charity, mental health awareness. I didn't realize at the time, though, how much of my own mental health awareness it would really trigger. Living in a small traditional country town, walking around with blue hair, and I mean blue hair, it was always going to strike up a conversation. So it did open up an opportunity as to why I'd done it, i.e. mental health and the taboo subjects that should be talked about more. After a few days of this, I started to hear the words that I was saying about keeping things bottled up and not expressing. And well, I started to realize that I should start taking my own advice. This is actually how this recording has happened. Over the last couple of nights, I was aware that someone was wishing negative things for me. So I said, God, angels all around, show me who is sending me these energies. Next minute I knew. I was looking at the time on the oven and it was my ex's birthday. The pain was in my shoulders, in my wings area. So I knew that it was time to record this. It's been sat on my laptop for nearly a year. I have been in fear to put this out there because I didn't want to have any repercussions. I didn't want to hurt him. This is the same with a lot of writing about my story and things. But I want to inspire others to tell their truth. Because why else do we go through what we go through and do all the work to remain strong in our authenticity if we cannot speak our truth? If anything in this audio has helped someone see the difference in how their life can be, or helps them let go and see the other side, then all the tears, all my choices, all the times where I put my fist through walls and I've kicked things and I've smashed plates, then they've not been in vain, and this is my way of being in service. I realized that I cannot let him have power over me anymore, and whilst this is sat on my laptop and my hard drive, I just keep getting pulled to post it. And by not talking about it, he still has that power over me. I cannot change this power struggle in our energy sphere until he has nothing to control me anymore. Therefore, I cannot close this chapter. So, having a conversation about taboo subjects we don't want to talk about, but we need to, well, that was a huge sign for me to listen and take that advice for my own life for a change. I am proud to have the courage to record this, and thus finally closing this amazing chapter, most amazing learning chapter of my life. And you cannot control what someone else thinks. You can just decide to be authentically you. Moving on to today's story and one I am loving living. Of course, I'm going to do this in the form of a life audit. Work in progress, aka a whip, because there's always more to learn. Status of soul retrieval, many dark nights of the soul, many moments in the awakenings, and learning, patience. Current emotional status, in peace. Looking at a beautiful snowy landscape in the holy mountains of Puha, Lapland. This is after traveling to many incredible sites around the world, including visiting both poles and being in the energy of 7 continents. Honestly, even back then, 2 years ago, if you told me whilst I was waiting for the divorce to be finalized, that I'd be living in a penthouse apartment near the beach, writing for a living, connecting with spirit, traveling and loved spending time with myself, oh, and here's the kicker, that I would find my divine partner and soul family, I would have said, yeah, all right, in another lifetime. But there you go. As I've mentioned, the dark nights of the soul, they are worth every tear. And they do make it sound that dramatic because shadow work, after all, can be dramatic. You cannot be the phoenix and rise again if you do not put a magnifying glass to the deepest and most often darkest and harshest parts of your truth. Quick note on the divine partner, counterpart, whatever you want to call it. That life-changing soul that came to me in the most beautiful timing basically was the one that triggered me by asking this question. What is it about you that allows people to treat you this way? Boom! What a way to put to his new girl on the spot for the first conversation. I won't tell you how magic my journey has been since meeting him, well, not in this chapter, but I will play back a scene as something incredible that happened. One time, after I dealt with a situation involving the ex and the police, the moment they left, something strange happened. The door clicked shut. My phone rang, and I was running back to pick it up. There was this huge blue flash in the hallway. Now, many clairvoyants I've been to haven't been able to tell me what happened. They can confirm it's a message, but they were being blocked as to know why. I believe, and it feels so right when I say this was me ending a huge soul contract and breaking a family ancestry curse, spell, whatever you want to say. I'll quickly tell you why. Well, in all things regards to the house sale, they'd been super slow. Everything was delayed. And then after this flash, wow, it was over within 3 months. All the trades came back, the people were lining up to help, so many truths came out, which made it even easier to let go and move forward and not cause any more delays. Even my lawyer was like, what the heck happened? Who are you connected to up there? Tell me your secret. This is something she said again when I finally got the settlement through. Lessons learned? Yes, I was massively in the ego at the beginning, from anger, pain, and fear, holding on to everything. The tiniest materialistic things, the knives, the forks, the plates, and the bigger things like the dogs, not realizing that they too had soul contracts. But in the end, you realize that this is just stuff. And actually, it's stuff with energy that keeps you tied to that part of your life. Just like this story. There'll always be two versions of it. And all the comments and all the other versions that people will spin, because let's be honest, humans love to judge and have an opinion. As they say, opinions, like assholes, everyone's got one. One of the hardest things that I've had to do along this process is face every attack with love. Whether that be people reflecting their judgment onto me, I need to do this, I need to say that, despite none of them ever being through a divorce, or what was happening through the whole process. But I learnt boundaries. I asked people to respect that there was only one person's opinion I would be listening to, and that was my lawyer. Some accepted it, and some didn't. I was away from my real life, and I now know I had my first moments of an awakening, although I didn't know what it was. Whilst helping the vets and the trauma response team, I realized how short life was and how far I had become from who I was. There I was in the middle of a tiny country town, Kuma, with this group of people I'd never met, helping out in whatever way I could, and I didn't even miss home. It pains me to say. When I was told if I don't come home, then the puppy would be given away because someone couldn't cope with him, I said, I don't need this right now. Do what you want to do, but there are others that need me. I knew that he would never get rid of Stuart. My mum would never let him. Yes, she was visiting there again. I called his bluff. I took my power back. How did I recognize the emotional blackmail? Well, because I was a scholar in it, and that was the first sign of me taking my power back and recognizing this big shadow. I realized if I give someone enough time and the ability to flow through a process the way they want to, versus how I've asked them to support me, you start to see the integrity of relationships and people. So yeah, I realize even the toughest moments where you can see and face things with love, first is to love yourself. Identify how much of this situation and this person's energy is taking away from your life force, your chi, and how much of that energy, if you just put the knives, the gloves, and the nasty comments down, whatever, and took some time out from everyone else's mind and everyone else's opinions, what does your mind's noise say? What does your heart's noise say? I'm so thankful that people were removed from my life sooner rather than later, because looking back on it now, I would have been in so much fear to take the risk to live this life I live now. I definitely couldn't have been burning sage, chanting Om, and removing negative entities with witchy talk. Like seriously, I made runes from a chicken carcass the other day, and every night I talk to my body, in particular harnessing the energy from my sacral chakra. I have a native dragon healer's tongue, and I always go and talk poetry to the trees, birds, and the moon. Yes, it's going to take a very special man to come into my life now, and you know what? I love the connection I have with God and the elements that are all around me. I love my Akashic records revealing more and more of my ancient knowledge and the gifts. And I love most of all, finding that childlike wizardry and wonder in everything. Hermione Granger? She's got nothing on me. Insert the wink with a kiss emoji. Think more George's incredible, marvelous Madsen. Okay, so back to the whip. That's work in progress, by the way. Get your mind out the gutter. I have learned the importance of not forcing an outcome, and that what is meant for you, people, situations, lessons, and stuff, will either stay in your life or be removed. What is meant for us never passes us by. Outcome and future suggestions. Strongly suggest you never rush healing. It is not something to take lightly. Part of the process, you may find a new hobby, etc. But if you become obsessed with it, then ask, are you just filling that void in your life with the new hobby? Challenge yourself to just sit and be in silence. No phone, no TV, or anything else to stimulate you. Try it. It's amazing when you can. You can hear so much more of what's going on inside of your heart. You will hear the voices to tell you to give your problems to the universe, to God, all as one, and trust. You may even be told, live in the present moment, alleviate the fear of the future. Living in the past means we'll struggle to live within the present, and purely living in the future? Well, what does your future look like if you cannot be happy in the present? All are the same. When you focus on your present moment, neither the past or the future exist. Yes, cheers Buddha. Easier said than done, right? But honestly, when you realize that words are so powerful and what we say to ourselves and how we keep ourselves stuck in patterns because we just can't let go, from what I found, this is one of the secrets to peace. See your pain in the mirror, name it, feel it, talk deeply to it, and acknowledge it. And when you're ready, you will realize that everything is connected. And if you are all connected, that someone somewhere is also feeling the same as you. So you are never alone. So once you hear your own inner shadows and start to forgive, it becomes easier to recognize them in other people. And once you finally truly love yourself, you learn to love people where they're at. And this becomes unconditional love. And if you're like me, you may go on a little bit of a journey like Scrooge did on the night before Christmas. Although mine wasn't really ghosts and a timeline of my life, it was more people who were just like me, my biggest shadows, and how they were triggering me into finding that unconditional love for both them and where they're at in their life, and for myself for where I am at in my life, but also showing me that I could choose how much I wanted to stay stuck with that energy or remove myself from that energy, love it, and say, thank you, but this is not me anymore. This was a huge realization for me. One example, I was on a rooftop in Cuba, Havana. Long story short, I'd gone up there as I was being a bit of a people pleaser, an old trait. All I wanted to do was go home, but the drink was flowing. Well, anyway, here I am with a guy who was getting rough with me, saying that all witches should have been burned and that he could rape me then and there. And yes, I kid you not, those were his words. Earlier in the evening, he was a very different person. Towards the end, he was high on rum and crack cocaine. Mum, if you're listening to this, please, you know I'm still here, so nothing happened, and I'd like to think you'd be really proud of me. I refused to go with him, and when he was manhandling me, I told him to get his fucking hands off me. Something came over me. Here I am, 5 foot nothing, and there he is, 6 foot plus. I looked him dead in the eyes and repeated, "Get your fucking hands off me." After that, he threw me to the ground and said, "You're no fun anyway." Walked down the ladder with the other guy, and I sat there not knowing where I was, who I was with, but I had this adrenaline that ripped through me. I looked up at the sky and said, "Dragons, Grandmother Earth, Grandfather Sky, my king, ancestors, anyone who's listening to me right now, please tell me I am safe and I am going to be okay." Just then, boom, shooting star flew through the sky. Boom, another one, and another one. 3. This was not the first time I was left to my own devices because a guy called me a name like a witch, bad witch, devil worshipper, or worse. But every time I made the choice to be alone in a place full, or not, of strangers, rather than fear for my own safety around people who were really making my feminine energy feel very unsafe. I knew I was protected because I walk with powerful ancestors and an incredibly protective soul group and my king. And no, I don't recommend you doing anything like what I did, but over the last 12 months and the connecting moments of where I haven't acted in my highest self, then surprise, surprise, you can connect it to alcohol. You see, I've learned a lot about being an open vessel for spirit and what the word spirit means and how it relates. So I choose to keep my hashtag spirit to my hashtag self. And if I do drink now, it is only when I'm with people who I know and trust. On an aside, when we start to awaken and we really want to open this channel to our soul, aka our God source, well, we become an open vessel for energy. And when we are under the influence of something that means that we lose inhibitions, doesn't it make sense that we are an empty vessel for all sorts of dark energy to creep in? For instance, if you say no and someone is insisting, and trust me, I hold my hand up to this. That has been me on so many occasions, trying to force people to drink because I didn't want to drink on my own or I wanted to continue the party. Come on, just one for the road. Let's have a quick shot. Go to the next club. It's much better in there. Have a drink with me. I now know and realize that words are from the mouth of magicians, dark and light. So if you say no, then this is your soul saying no. Get the fuck out of there and remain with your boundaries. To anyone I have forced to drink onto because I wanted someone to drink with, I wanted to carry on the party, I wanted to keep the vibe high in a false way, then all I can say is I get it now, and I am grateful that I see this within myself, and I ask for you to forgive me. My friend said something to me the other day. I've given up drink. until I can have a good relationship with it. And maybe that will mean I never want to have it again. These words inspired me to look within and ask what my relationship was with drinking. And was I even enjoying it anymore? Or had it become a habit to have a beer or wine just because? I mean, you never need it. And if you do, well, this could be a sign of a much bigger issue. Next time you order a shot, a spirit, just look around the place and ask yourself, how is the energy here? And if you sense that something is not the best vibe, trust it. Those from the other worlds also have addictions and will latch onto you if they see an opportunity, aka losing your inhibitions. I have had it happen to me, and I didn't believe it. So, well, I asked for it to be shown exactly what happens. One soul leaves, and maybe it's not the full soul, maybe it's just fragments that leave, but either way, it clears the space. So, you can imagine the people pleaser, the party animal, the starseed, the light worker, the one who is actually not supposed to drink, which is all of us. Well, then you're an empty vessel for another soul to feast and get its kicks. As I said earlier, you will either resonate with this or not, but either way, I hope it will make you think a little. Okay, so back to survival and thrival. Have your dreams, remember them, and pursue them. Take a risk. There's a card in the tarot system called the Fool, and when you pull it, it's about the universe asking you to trust. And this is a constant thing. The universe does ask us to trust. God asks us to trust. God, your higher self, asks you to trust. For instance, if you were planning your soul contract to come to life now, would you plan anything but the most incredible life? If the answer is, well, yes, I would plan the most incredible life, then why can't you resonate with that now? Why can't you believe that this is what your soul has done for you? And if you trust a little bit more, maybe you'll be guided towards those dreams. And yes, it may take time. We come here to learn patience. That is another fundamental thing that you will learn. Just because we want something, time doesn't exist at a soul level. It does in our earthly planes. But once we say, this is a dream, this is what I really want to do, if it's aligned, if it's in our purpose, it will happen. You just have to let go. There's those words again. Let go of who, what, where, how, and why, etc., etc. I said when I was 5 years old, I wanted to see the penguins. I wanted to walk with the penguins. What did I do last year? I got to walk with the penguins. And I suddenly remembered that conversation of my childhood dreams. And then I suddenly remembered a lot of other things about my childhood that I'd completely forgotten about. I asked God to send the collective the dreams that they've been praying for on a regular basis, because the more people who can see essences and tiny parts of these miracles that they've been praying for, the more people can see that this magic exists because they haven't given up hope, the more people will start to remember these dreams and remove themselves from those stuck paradigms and actually start to live their life with carpe diem, no fear, seizing that moment and that day. So yes, silence the negative voices in your head by constantly having the spiritual vacuum attached to your ear. Spiritual vacuum, not a real one. Spiritual. I definitely don't be recommending a V10 stick vacuum to your head. Well, a couple of things that have worked for me was to give myself a trigger word so I could recognize and acknowledge when I needed to remove myself from the conversation or the situation. Try and take an audit on your friends, and as hard as it is, your family, anyone who's close to you. I still write down people's names and then how they're impacting my life. And if it's not positive, well then it's either distance or ciao. Either way, it's done with love. And I'm sure the PwC would love to know the skills that I learned on my 3-day auditor's course have been put to good use. Gap analysis, work in progress reports, data, risk analysis. Anyone would think that was the real story of life. A wise earth angel, Justine Dean, who has always helped me, explained these things. 1. Write a list of who you were before you met the person or got into the situation, and the one that you are now in that situation or relationship. 2. Meet people where they're at. You will not change them, nor should you want to. If they are right for you, they will change themselves. If you are to grow together, you will. 3, you have all the answers. Try not to outsource them. 4, you do not always get closure, and ask why you need it. Will it help change the situation? 5, how much energy are you giving someone and therefore taking it away from yourself? And 6, this is my favorite one that we worked on together. If it's not a fuck yes. After I started to live my life with these things in mind, day by day, I started to see my energy change, diet change, habits change, guilt concept change, self-worthiness wound change, relationships change, people-pleasing change. I know that you're picking up what I'm putting down. Final findings of the report. Earth angels are out there. And if you ask the universe for help because you are stuck and want things to change, they will send them to you. Some will be animals, some will be people, some will be conversations that resonate, some will be blatant signs, some will be just go to nature. But when you're in sync with the Divine Father and Mother, the sun and the moon, God within, all is one. Everything gets magical. You will realize how your life can change and how quickly it can if you just work with that part of you that resides in the dark feminine energy, that part that is so powerful that when you harness the divine light within, you could say, the more people who are balanced in their energy, bringing it back to self and listening to themselves, well, watch out, society. When you take back your power from all things that have abused, shamed, and ridiculed you and tried to keep you small, this is what the powers that be are scared of. People actually loving their shadows, loving the shit out of their shadows, and loving each other, because authenticity creates the most incredible vibration in this world. If you're like me, you'll fall deeper and deeper in love with your soul's journey and your ancestors and your agreed path. You'll be able to do things that you had never fathomed to be able to do. And you'll remember so much about relating life to nature that everything becomes a sign as to how your life is right now and how it is heading. One example and a last story to relate, because my Native American guide will always want me to take a enlightenment opportunity. If you stub your toe, bang your hip, hurt your knee, look up what it means in the spiritual messages. Remember, your soul is always one step ahead. Now, those with pains will keep hurting until you address what it's telling you. Likewise, if you bang your head, usually telling you that you are putting a ceiling over yourself. And when you start to read the numbers and the signs, your truck moments are non-existent, or you become a master at dodging the bricks. When I was in Cape Verde, I turned my back on a soul who wanted to dance with me. He was an incredible salsa dancer, but I let something get in my head about me not wanting to dance with a man who was covered in dirt and greasy overalls. I know, right? I'm ashamed. I've forgiven myself now, but at the time I couldn't believe that I'd said those things. But something obviously in me thought I was better than him. Anyway, I was running back to see my friend in the bar, and I tripped. There was a raised nail in the floor. I sliced my knee open. But here is the thing. There was no rip in my trousers at all. I lost my rose quartz necklace down the slats of the deck, and I was severely winded. Of course, all the commotion, there was a ton of people who turned up. Now this gash, well, you could see my bone. It was deep. All I cared about, though, was my necklace. It was my Trinity knot amulet, connection to my roots. This guy came over. I later found out he was living on the streets. He took one look at where my necklace was, left, came back with what looked to be 2 pea pods off a tree, and basically used them as chopsticks to get the necklace. He spent half an hour doing this. Then he refused to take money that I offered him. In the end, I asked the security guard to get some dinner, and I said, God, when I got my breath, I know what happened. I turned my back on someone that you put in my path to meet. Let me put this right. If I'm supposed to have that dance with him, please, let it be done. Later that night, ice bag struck to the leg, knee completely swollen and claret dripping down. There was live music on in the streets, and yes, guess who turned up? V, the guy I didn't dance with. Well, we got our dance, and it was painfully incredible. That night, my friend took the torch to the cat and said, Kat, we really need to get you to hospital. It was black. I refused. I said, I honor the pain of what this was and what it's meant, and I know it was all for a purpose. All will be okay. I put myself in a trance to sleep that night, and the next day V showed me around town and found a grandmother type to get me some natural pain relief and some oil. Can you believe in a place that used to be all natural remedies, there was only pharmaceutical pills and creams to be found? I'm sure you probably can, actually, judging the state of today's world. I hopped on a chair, She took one look at my knee, held her hand over it, doing some Reiki, and massaged in this oil. She gave me the rest of the bottle and said something in Creole, which V confirmed was massage 5 times a day and you'll be fine soon. And sure enough, I was. Just before I left, she grabbed my chin, she pulled it up to her, she kissed my forehead and said something else, which was basically, may God be with you. No hospital, no pain, and after 3 days, I was hiking up and down hills. Now, I have a scar that activates when spirit wants to tell me something. V was a part of a karma contract and we quickly bonded after spending a few days. I got to meet a lot of the street kids and it was great to be with someone who they trusted. This way I could learn more of the truth about the sex tourism and the dark things happening there. You see? Crazy story, right? But I have the scar and the videos to prove it, and the beautiful memories of spending time with those guys. This scar will always remind me never to judge someone again. Seeing people for their soul and not their circumstance. I pray one day I get to see him again and have another dance when blood isn't pouring out like a tap. In fact, I'll go one further and say, I pray that one day he dances with someone who has the finances to set him up as a dance teacher so he can teach the other boys and get them off the streets. And if that's me, wow, that is a double whammy of a prayer answered. And so it is done. Well, this leads me on to don't be scared to fall and get back up several times. It is worth every tumble, broken bone, and gash in your skin, if you listen to the signs and what is being said. It is true that vibrating high is addictive, and then you'll soon recognize the signs of when people want to knock you down. And yes, sadly, there are many that will be triggered as you start to find your purpose, live your life, and find your beautiful voice. If you're wanting to embark on a healing journey, then a great place to start is that list. Writing a list of who you were before you met the person, got into the situation, and one as you are in the relationship/situation. And see how far the gaps are from who you were, are now, and who you want to be. Take it step by step. Call in the angels and the guides. And here's a handy tip when you're ready. Look into soul contracts, generational trauma, and conditioning, because it's all very real. Forgive yourself for the guilt and any blame that you have cast upon yourself or others, any victim mentality or methods of manipulation and emotional blackmail that you have used. And please, be honest, because we have all done it. To know a narcissist means we recognize something within us. Mark Manson calls it a relationship of a competition of wanting to be seen and heard. If you really dig deep, you will see the push-pull and your part to play in trying to control the other person as much as they were with you. These relationships are so integral with us finding our wings again. So honor them and the wounded people you were. Remember, labeling someone does not make it better or easier. But when you are ready to accept your part to play and that they are hurt too, then if you choose to, you can, and you will find that forgiveness. You will get through this. You will find earth angels that will help you. Go within and trust what you hear. And by all means, take some guru's advice, but remember, as people say, you are your own guru. Carpe diem, take a leap of faith. Just see how amazing your life gets.